I was the natural person to lead the sport after the old bulls were leaving, and I didn't. And there was a number of reasons for that, because the oven was quite hot. And if you weren't taking the right political path, I'm calling it politics because it was politics. It's just a smaller little nation, and but if you didn't do what the people in power wanted to have done, bad shit happened to you pronto. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to be recognized as, I was more interested in being an entertainer than I was an athlete, primarily because I'm a lot better entertainer than I am an athlete. And so what I did is I entertained. And when I played matches when I was in my prime, where the Petri dish allowed me to do what I did, it was entertaining. And if anybody who watched that came back for a second dose, because it was something to see. And it wasn't because of me being it was just that everything congealed to where I was able to do in my little way what Kane does, not to compare myself to a guy who doesn't lose. I lost plenty of times. And that's why it was dramatic when I played. You didn't know whether I was going to win and what type of hostile move I was going to do to prevent a second loss from the guy. And that was the fun. It was fun. Now, I didn't put anybody's eye out. You know, I made them wear eye guards. But it was more of a scuffle. It was more entertainment. But it didn't have the intangible wrongs of the present game. The intangible wrongs are when you try to be so fair that you create circumstances that don't make any rational sense. And I'll give you my one political idea that I think is the most ridiculous of all, is to have boys race or fight girls because they perceive themselves as girls, and so, hey, I'm going to just beat the living shit out of you because I perceive myself as a girl, but I've got all these physical advantages over you. That's not right, and it's going to not be, it cannot survive, or the sport will fail. So women's sports is now in a similar circumstance as we were. The sport would fail if we allowed the rackets and the balls to get faster and faster and faster. But we did it. We allowed that. And we allowed it even though several of us said, don't do it. It's not going to go well for us. And they let it go. Now, on this politics with the boys competing against the girls, I can guarantee you that will not go well. It doesn't take a Charlie Brumfield to see that. It's not going to go well, and it's going to be scuffling around, and then they'll try to come out with fair ways of resolving it. What's the fair way? What do you have them give away 5 yards? Do you bring 8 linesmen in to make the call? You know, they instead of doing the simplest things, leave it the way it was. Instead of doing that simple thing, they did all of these acts undoubtedly out of goodness and in trying to do the right thing, and they've created what they've created. We've created it. I have to take, I've had my paintbrush up there on that wall, and so I apologize for that. To the extent that I didn't do more, it's the worst possible thing is to be number 1 of the 20 for a limited period of time, and not to have spent every moment, my fiber of my being, keeping this alive so that the next group of 20 could enjoy it like I did. It's heartbreaking when I look back at it with that in mind, with that small, but that's not the way people look back. They look back, oh, could Kane have beaten Cliff Swain? Could Sudsy have beaten Charlie or Yellen? That's what everyone wants to talk about. It's the same in basketball. In basketball, to me, they've destroyed the game. And they've got a bunch of people throwing up balls from 50 feet, and that's it. Okay? Is that as beautiful as the game was in the 80s? You tell me. When any kind of style could win if you did it right. And you all have lived through that and watched it. It's the same thing. Baseball has probably remained closer to its roots than any other major sport. But even they are beginning to drift. And, you know, they're doing it in a way where I'm sure they're trying to be as fair as they can, just like the racquetball people that are controlling the sport today. They're trying to be as fair as they can, but they've lost the dish. It's a little bit screwed up, and with the drug problem and all of the stuff, the game's a different game. So you don't get anybody trying to bunt. When's the last? I mean, they just flail away. It's like the 3-pointers in basketball. How many times do you want to see a 30-foot shot thrown up? How many times? That's the same thing as watching the ace serve or the kill shots that the pros can make every single. They don't miss. Of course they're not going to miss. It is created in a way that makes it hard to miss. It really is. And that's why it's so screwed up, because a defensive player can't play defense against that. There is no defensive player. And when you don't have a defensive player, you don't have an offensive player. That's a funny way of looking at it. But you really haven't beaten everybody if you've never beaten a defensive player. A guy like Stranimo. I mean, Stranimo's memory now is that he was Mr. Sportsmanlike, but Stranimo was a competitor's competitor, and he was in your jock. When you go and watch a modern game, the players are so far away from each other, it is hard to even imagine anyone ever getting hit. Or, I mean, it's just it's weird. You know, they're out there, they're outstanding, spectacular athletes, and they go, oh, wait a second. You know, I don't think I had a fair chance to hit that ball. There was a guy up 20 feet away from me. I can't be having anyone dog me that close. I want to hinder, and I want 10 minutes to discuss it with the referee and the 8 linesmen. I don't see it. They've got to get an old bull in there and say, enough of this, and go back to what worked. What is it that allowed the sport to have a Bud Muehlheisen win at the same time a Steve Keeley could win, a Charlie Brumfield, a Marty Hogan? All of these players could compete, and they changed it, and boom, suddenly Cliff Swain came up with a great serve and became one of the greatest champions in history. It's almost like they could almost bring another player in, anybody of the top 20, if he served for them, they would be the top player. And that's what's weird. In the old days, one gift did not bring you the championship of the country in racquetball. One gift did not do it. I don't care how fast you were, you could get beat. I don't care how hard you hit, you could get beat. And I no longer feel that way when I watch the pros. I do not feel that that there's a true offense and defense and clash against one another. And until you get that back, you don't have the drama. If you don't have the drama, you're going to have courts torn down because people aren't going to play. If you don't create the sport so that the regular player can have a rally and get a good workout within an hour's period, which is why the sport was growing so magnificently quickly from the mid-60s to the mid-70s and into the late 70s and into the 80s, was the people could play and get a great workout.